All right, everyone, we'll get started here. Good morning, I'm Samantha Berger, I'm the Natural Resources Coordinator. Today we will be covering our MS4 training. So this is an annual training that we do with all you good folks, and we'll cover a few different things here. First, I'll give a brief introduction and talk about our favorite topic, illicit discharge. Then we'll have Brian Hartman come up and talk about erosion and sediment control 101. We also will provide a brief fisheries update. Then we'll go through our good housekeeping measures, so we'll have a representative from streets, fleet, parks, utilities speak, and then we'll have a special speaker today. We'll have Evan Acosta talk about a grant and some street reconstruction work that we have occurring in the Apple Valley Additions neighborhood. All right, so reason we're here today is we have a number of water bodies within our city, and part of our requirements for the MS4 permit, which stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer Permit, is to protect these water bodies through our daily practices. So within the city, we have a number of lakes, most of which unfortunately are impaired. So we've got Almagnet Lake, Long Lake, Keller Lake, Farquhar Lake, we actually drain to East Lake, and then we also have our Loch Levon and Cobblestone Lake and Scout Lake as well. And in addition to those lakes, we also have over 300 stormwater ponds. So this MS4 obligation, the things that we need to cover, we have to do public education and outreach. We need to discuss illicit discharge detection and elimination, talk about construction site runoff controls, so how you're managing soil and your construction site during construction, talk about post-construction runoff controls, so that's something like installing stormwater ponds after development occurs, and then probably the biggest piece that we have to deal with is pollution prevention or good housekeeping. If I had to sum up the ultimate goals of the MS4 is 1, prevent dirty water from entering the storm system, to protect our sensitive areas from sediment and erosion, to both improve and maintain the water quality in our city water bodies, and then of course to educate the staff and the public. But really to sum it all up, only rain down the drain. Because ultimately, what happens on our streets can feed algae blooms in our lakes. So just want to cover a little bit of the public education and outreach that we do. So we do offer homeowner grant programs and workshops to help improve water quality. So we'll offer 50% up to $500 to residents who want to install rain gardens, shoreline stabilization projects, even native plantings. We also educate the public through our topical newsletter articles, which you can see on our website. We allow people to do storm drain stenciling, and then we offer public input at our annual Home and Garden Show. On to the next topic here is illicit discharge detection, and we'll actually watch just a short video. But basically, this is the idea that we only want rain going down the drain. So if you see any sorts of spills that are entering into the storm sewer system, that's something that we want to make sure that we're containing, reporting if needed, and doing cleanup measures as appropriate. So we do have a spill response flow chart. I don't expect you to read that, but just know that it does exist. Your supervisors all have a copy of it. And so if you do see a spill, we'll talk about what you should do. But without further ado, I'm going to just do a short 2-minute video here.
It is sad but true that for years, some people have been using storm drains to dispose of their wastes. A lot of people still don't know that storm sewer systems aren't like sanitary sewers. Sanitary sewers take waste from bathrooms and kitchens and clean them up. Storm sewers, on the other hand, do not treat or clean up anything passing through them. Storm sewers are just pipes and ditches designed to channel clean stormwater runoff away from urbanized areas. One of the responsibilities of municipalities that operate storm sewer systems is to prevent what the EPA calls illicit discharges. Illicit discharges are any discharges of non-stormwater into or through the storm sewer. Many of us see one of the most common sources of illicit discharges every day: trash that didn't quite make it into an outdoor dumpster or trash can. These wastes are easily washed into the nearest storm drain inlet by the next storm. You may have seen or heard about other bad practices, like dumping used motor oil, engine coolant, or cigarette butts onto the street or down the storm drain. Like cleaning floor mats, filters, paintbrushes, screens, mops, or other items outdoors. Like using a storm drain to dispose of unwanted fertilizers, pesticides, pet wastes, or car ashtrays. Is just like dumping these wastes right into the nearest stream or river. Report any obvious or suspicious discharges to your local stormwater authority. The information you provide can directly and quickly eliminate a major source of surface water pollution. Call your local public works or engineering department, or just call the main number for your city, town, or county and ask who's responsible for stormwater. Are you ready to help?
Okay, so now that you have that brief video here, I guess if you guys are out in the field and you witness any pollution occurring into the storm drain, step 1 would be to contain. Step 2, consult your flow charts. Also talk to your supervisor or your foreman. And in terms of reporting problems, you want to make a call to either your supervisor, natural resources staff, or also happy to help. For major emergencies, call 911. And large spills, you need to actually call the state duty officer. So the number's there. And then after hours, you're welcome to call dispatch, which the phone number is listed as well. All right, with that, I will send it over to Brian Hartman.
So yeah, I'm Brian Hartman. I'm the Water Resources Specialist. And I'll be going over erosion and sediment control. So to start, just a little bit of history and background on how kind of protecting our water bodies and erosion control became a thing. So in 1969, the Cuyahoga River in Ohio actually started on fire. And at that point, a river starts on fire, people say, oh, we should probably do something about this, put some measures into place that kind of, control and monitor what we're putting into our water bodies. So in 1972, Congress passed the Clean Water Act. That was kind of, adopted by the EPA and then passed down to state agencies. So for us, the MPCA. And then kind of trickles down to our city of Apple Valley MS4 permit. So that's why we're here today. The river starting on fire was mainly caused by heavier pollutants caused by industrial facilities kind of along the river. But after that happened, they were kind of looking into, what else is polluting our water bodies, and that, they found to be sediment. So sediment pollution is actually the #1 pollutant in our water bodies today, and is why erosion control is a big deal today. So erosion and sediment control, 2 different pieces. Erosion control, preventing disturbed soil from moving initially, where sediment control is capturing that sediment after it has been moved. Examples that we'll see on site include hydromulch, erosion control blanket, rock, straw mulch, temporary vegetation, and even things like a tarp, just to prevent that soil from moving after a rain event. This goes for just disturbed soil on the ground, as well as stockpiles. And keep in mind that there is different time frames for temp stabilizing that soil or stockpile based on the proximity to special or impaired waters. A little bit more B&Ps for sediment control. Most common ones that we see on site are biologs, silt fence, inlet protections. So we're, ensuring that these are #1 installed on site, but then #2 being maintained and cleaned out after they've been filled in with sediment. Rock entrances and street sweeping. So the point of rock entrances would be, if it's just one lot, if you're going onto one lot, say it's just one singular house, keeping your tires off the sediment to begin with. If it's kind of a larger site and you're going in and out, the idea is that the rock entrances are knocking sediment off the tires before you get onto a paved street, ending up in the catch basin. It is a construction site, so we're not 100% ever. So that's where street sweeping comes into play. If we do have track out on the street, we're coming through with a street sweeper and getting it cleaned up before it enters the catch basins, and then eventually our local water bodies. For lakes, rivers, and wetlands, if we're working adjacent to them, the state permit requires 2 rows of perimeter silt fence, just as extra precaution if you're working right next to them. Outfalls, the main thing that we're looking for is riprap installed at the end of them. Serves 2 purposes. One, it slows down the velocity of water, so it's preventing erosion stemming from the apron of the outfall. And then 2, it does settle out some sediments as well, so we can go back into the riprap, either add more, clean it out. So those, kind of the 2 purposes of riprap at outfalls. And then stormwater ponds and infiltration basins. So I guess you might think, we have all these stormwater ponds and and basins in the city, what's the point of installing erosion and sediment control? A couple reasons. So for stormwater ponds, they are meant to settle out sediment, but we need to make sure that there's erosion control installed up gradient, really for two purposes. So one, the more we discharge sediment into our ponds, the higher likely that we're going to have turbid water that's hitting that emergency overflow and going down gradient. And then two is kind of our infrastructure. So if we do have a lot of sediment entering our storm sewer system, we're going to have a lot more clogged pipes. That is, an extra time and expense. And then the sooner that pond is going to fill up with sediment and needs to be dredged and cleaned out, which is a big expense. For infiltration basins, same type of deal, but obviously infiltration basins are meant to infiltrate. So they are made up with a specific media to allow that water to infiltrate down back into the water table. If in most cases that media is sand. So if we do get heavy loads of sediment coming into that basin, it kind of creates a crust over the top of the basin and doesn't allow it to hit that sand and infiltrate. So we have to go back in and clean it out, so we allow that to happen. Other forms of sediment control, anytime we're dewatering, which doesn't occur that often, but it does happen on site, so just make sure that we have a dewatering bag to collect all the sediment. So it's clean water being discharged. You can see the picture on the left, clean water coming out of the bag, versus the right picture with no bag and turbid water going off site. Housekeeping items, so having secondary containment on items like concrete washout, portable toilet, paint, gas. If something does leak or tip over and has a spill, we have some measure that's there in place to collect whatever pollutant it might be before it ends up in the catch basin. Trash as well, more of just a housekeeping item, make sure that we're keeping our sites clean. And then BMPs for our neighboring properties. So erosion control is kind of a tiered system, I guess. So number one, obviously for the environment, keeping our water bodies clean. Second would be the infrastructure of our stormwater ponds and storm sewer lines. And then thirdly is for our downstream neighbors. So we all work in the city, we get a lot of complaints. For example, if a house is just put up and they got fresh sod, there's a construction site going on right next to it, and there's no BMP or erosion control on site. We're discharging sediment onto their new sod. That's where complaints come in, and that's actually the number one, I guess, trigger for the MPCA to come out and inspect that construction site. So, kind of a tiered system for erosion control. Next is kind of a brief example of an erosion and sediment control plan. This is a pretty standard plan, so we have a proposed building in the middle. We have the red line around the outside is our perimeter silt fence. The blue rectangles are our construction entrances, and then the yellow dots are our inlet protection. So if we get a new project in and we're reviewing the plans, we're making sure that all these measures are installed, and then when we go out for an inspection, we're making sure that they're maintained and keeping them up to date. So pretty standard plan here. Bigger construction sites, there's going to be some sort of stormwater pond or basin on site that we're also looking at as well. So kind of wrapping it all up and kind of putting it together. So why does it matter? Mainly sediment pollution in this case. So sediment entering our water creates excess nutrients, mainly nitrogen and phosphorus, which Sam pointed out in one of her slides leads to more algae blooms and bigger algae blooms altogether. It has impacts on our aquatic vegetation, specifically invasive plants, creating an environment for invasive plants to kind of thrive. It decreases water clarity, which impacts the amount of sunlight that can enter the lake and hit our vegetation and allow the vegetation to grow. It depletes oxygen levels, which has impacts on our fisheries health, and then also just recreation and aesthetics of the lake. So, living in Minnesota, we all have, I'm sure somebody or maybe yourself up north or wherever it might be, but usually we all, like to spend a lot of time on the lake. So whether that be recreational or hunting or fishing or just enjoying the lake. So kind of important that we keep them clean. Next slide, fisheries. Not exactly erosion control, but figured I'd just throw it in here to kind of talk about it. So this year we stocked 2 different lakes, Allmagnet and Farquhar. For Allmagnet, we put northern pike and largemouth bass. The numbers are up there. The main reason for stocking those species in Allmagnet was to kind of cut down on the panfish population. So there is a stunted panfish population in Allmagnet, which basically means too much panfish, not enough panfish food. So we want to introduce some predators, or I guess more predators, to the lake to kind of bring those numbers down so that the rest of the panfish population kind of thrive and have enough food. For Farquhar, we stocked 25 adult walleye and 600 fingerlings. I guess the main reason for that, there is a black bullhead population in Farquhar. While I do eat them, it's not their primary source or primary food source, but they do eat them. So black bullhead, they are bottom feeders, so basically stirring up the bottom sediments, uprooting vegetation. So we want to bring those numbers down. And also just, I guess the other reason is walleye are fun to catch, good eating. So not as much thought into that one as Allmagnet, but there is a purpose. And then actually I found out this morning that tomorrow the DNR is going to come out and stock Long Lake and a couple of the surrounding ponds with northern pike. And that's mainly to fight off the goldfish populations in the lake and in the surrounding ponds. So a couple different lakes that we stocked this year. And yeah, I think that was it. So questions, feel free to reach out at any time. And I think I'll pass it off to Chris in Streets.
I think you guys will hear me for the most part. Is it good? For those of you who don't know, I'm Chris Myers. I'm the new street maintenance supervisor. Started in August. For that, I was in Bloomington for 14 years as a supervisor, as well as 10 years as an operator. So a lot of experience with street operations there. I know you guys just heard they're stocking the lakes. Don't be punching holes and taking all these new fresh fish out of there. Let's let them do their job first. Talk a little bit about plowing operations and anti-icing. As you guys see, it's snowing. Great, it's supposed to do that. Last couple of years have been pretty bleak as far as snow totals, so kind of nice to see it again. Our operators like it too. At times, gets a little overwhelming. Mechanically removing the snow before salting is the best practice. And you see some contractors, they'll just be chemically plowing. That's what we want to avoid. It's not good for the environment, and it's kind of a waste of salt because you got to use a lot more of it. So remove the salt or snow first before you apply salt. And you also see our crew. If we know the conditions are right, we'll be out anti-icing, treating pavement that does not have salt on it. We'll try to get ahead of these storms. Looks like we'll have a chance tomorrow again, but from the last storm, we should have enough salt on our roads to kind of help us out there, keep the snow from bonding to the roadway, which is our ultimate goal. Our operator supervisors, we attend MPCA smart salting class. Operators, except for our 2 newest hires, they all have their winter maintenance operator certificates. We'll get the 2 new guys going too. Application of salt and brine is based upon temperatures before, during, and after. If we know it's going to get really cold, we will switch over to our treated salt. If we kind of see temperatures are in the 20s and rising, we'll try to use white salt. And then that goes for our liquids too. If it's warmer, we'll use straight brine. If it gets a little colder, we'll put some calcium in there, kind of heat it up a little bit. And if it's really cold like today, we would probably have to use straight Apex, which is a calcium chloride additive. That helps prevent adhesion of the snow to the roadways again. That's the biggest thing that we strive for. Once it's bonded to the roadways, you know it is very hard to get up. If you got all that snow packed on there, it takes thousands of pounds sometimes to break it, especially when it's cold. So sooner we can get that snow off there, sooner we can treat it before it bonds, the better. All plow trucks, F550s, have a pre-wet system. The pre-wet system kind of acts, it wets the salt down, kind of like if you had a piece of paper and you threw it against the wall, a dry piece, it just kind of scatters. You wet it down a little bit like a spitball, it'll stick. That's one way to think of that. Again, salt brine we kind of talked about, 20 degrees or rising, blend, and then the Apex C, that's our calcium chloride when it's really cold like today. We have 2 trucks we can send out to pre-treat roads before an event. See the F550 on the left, and then our newest unit, 1800, I think it's 1800 gallon tank to treat roadways before the event. Storm sewer maintenance, again, our big thing with streets is we try to keep the roadways clear of debris and sediment. So that's why one of our biggest things you'll see us doing is sweeping the streets, getting all those leaves out of there. Right now, we'll be working with natural resources to identify ponds that have excess sediment that we need to remove. And then we will excavate those and haul that material out. We probably saw us, we were trimming around some ponds in the area. And we'll be continuing to do that and work with natural resource to identify ponds we got to do some trimming with. We use our new Fecon head to kind of mulch all that up around the ponds, clears them out, looks really nice. After large rain events, we'll send staff around to our local area ponds and check to make sure everything is flowing, inlets and outlets are good, any trees that have fallen over, make sure that those are not obstructing anything, keep everything moving. And then when we identify catch basins that are usually in the roadway, we'll see voids or something like that. It lets us know the catch basin needs to be repaired. It's not working as it should. And so we'll have our staff actually repair those, make sure that they're in good working order. Pond sediment removal. See an excavator, we take our excavator, remove the excess sediment, and then we'll haul that over by our salt shed. It has to be tested before it is hauled away. Street sweeping. We just finished up 1.5. We got through the whole city one time and we got about halfway through before the snow said that's it for the year for us. So pretty good. Ideally we'd like to get through it twice if we can, because the leaves are usually not even falling when we first start, but we have to start early or we will not get through the entire city. So spring sweeping, try to get as much of that leftover sediment as we can before it enters the roadway. When spring rains, kind of wash all that stuff down into our ponds. Do our best to get as much as we can before it becomes an issue and the sediment builds up in the ponds. Summer, we'll use our Timco's regenerative air sweepers to kind of maintain, as construction projects are going around and people are doing all these projects, they're dragging out mud and other materials into the road. So try to get out there as much as we can to keep everything clear. And then our 3 intensive sweeping areas, try to hit those monthly as time allows. We have 2 mechanical street sweepers, the Elgins there on the left, and then we just added a new regenerative air Timco sweeper, so now we also have 2 of those. Sam, very happy in the back. There you go. So we'll have yet another sweeper to kind of help keep these intensive areas clear. So here are those on the map. We got our area out west, Alamagnet. We also have Keller Lake and Long and Farquhar. So those are our areas you'll see our staff kind of focusing on. Cleaning sweepers over by our salt shed over there. We got a spot at the Timco's rinse out at. Kind of lets the solids drain out there before they're hauled away. Material storage and track out. All materials are stored outside. Make sure that we have the proper erosion barriers to prevent leaching from the piles. And then around the salt barn, you'll see we have erosion log to make sure that all the rain and stuff isn't running that into our storm drains. Utilizing mud mats when we're doing excavations around ponds, as well as when we're doing cemetery digs. So making sure we're not tracking any of the dirt way onto the roads. And if we do, we sweep it up. As you can see, anything that's outside, we contain it. That's kind of the picture on the left side. We cover our salt to make sure rain and snow is not getting on that. And then anything that is kept outside for long periods of time, we will wrap that up, keep it from the elements from ruining those. So that's what I had. Thank you.
Hello, Scott Werner, Fleet and Building Supervisor, here to talk about some spill response plans that we have in place. Here on the picture shows, I believe this was actually a garbage truck, so we had contacted the company about getting out there to get their floor dry out to try to soak up some of that oil material that was spilt on the roadway. And then also kind of shows a street sweeper to get that cleaned back up, try to help eliminate any of that from going down the storm drains. Along with the spill response, we have spill kits located throughout the shop. So above the fleet foreman office, there's some spill kits up there along with some absorbent towels and then absorbent pillows as well. All the plow trucks have spill kits in them as well, as we have a lot of hydraulics on them. They do leak, blow a hose from time to time, so to help contaminate that if need be. We keep them at all the plow trucks. Some of the foreman trucks have them as well. And then we also have some at the fuel island as well, in case there's a spill or an overfill while fueling. Floor dry locations, I know we have a couple different locations for them. Throughout the fleet maintenance shop, there's multiple locations where you can get floor dry. Street shop also have some, park shop. I know the new PD building also has it as well. I didn't add that on here. So if we need floor dry to help respond to a spill, they're located in them areas. And then, like I said, the 5-gallon pail, that should have a spill kit in it, so if we do have an overfill while fueling on site. And then next, talking about the hazard and material storage and recycling. So a lot of the fleet department, and I know parks use it, streets as well, reusable rags. There is a clear plastic bag. That's a service that is provided by Cintas. So we're not throwing away rags all the time. We're rewashing any of the dirty rags that are used for the mechanic shop. Used tires, we keep all of them in the fourth or old wash bay on the end of the fleet shop. So try to keep them from being stored outside. That can also create a bug issue, so we store all them inside and then recycle them when we have time and need more room. Fluorescent bulbs we keep in central receiving. There's a shelf that's labeled out there, so from time to time we'll dispose of all them. But if you have them, you can bring them over there. New and used floor dry. There's barrels, so typically next to each barrel, one barrel's got new floor dry in it, one's got old floor dry in it, and then we have that recycled as well. Used oil and antifreeze, that's in the third bay. So there's a 55-gallon drum for used antifreeze, and then the used oil, we actually have an underground tank. Used oil filters, we have a crushing system to try to get all the oil out of there before we recycle them. There's also a 55-gallon drum to throw them in when we're done with it. Used batteries, a lot of times, depending on what piece of equipment it's in, will get taken back by who we purchased the batteries through for cores. Otherwise, some of the other ones, there is a yellow tote in the old wash bay as well, or the fourth bay off a fleet. Aerosol cans, as long as they're empty, we were able to throw them in the garbage. So.
Good morning. Steve Rother, Park Superintendent. I'll talk on a couple things we do in parks to help out. First thing is smart chemical use. Kind of know what you're using, what the intended application is, and just remember the label is the law. If it says you're not supposed to use it somewhere, don't use it there. Smart watering. Just kind of pay attention to where we're watering. We don't want to be watering hard surfaces, don't need to. Know the existing conditions. If it's raining, don't water. There's a lot of rain sensors that we have on our irrigation systems. If we get half an inch of rain, it's going to shut them off. So we're not overwatering too. Fertilizing, kind of the same thing. Do it where you need it. Picture on the left here is a soil sample we had done a couple years ago. We do that every so often at our athletic complexes, and then get prescription fertilizer. So we're putting down the fertilizer we need where we need it. So we're not overdoing it or underdoing it. We're trying to get our grass to stay green, but not go overkill on it. Seeding disturbed areas, kind of the erosion control thing. This is after we did some forestry mowing. All of our parks following that basically got bare grounds. We're going over it not only to get something besides buckthorn to grow there, we're also stabilizing the soil. This one's on a hill, obviously, so trying to keep everything where it is, cover the soil, protecting near our shoreline areas, just using protection and cover and working near slopes and waterways. If that's blankets, the hydro mulching works real well. We got the picture on the left here is a stairwell we have. Some of that's some rock in there, which will slow down the erosion going down that hill, especially towards the lake. And we do have biologs in there too, to contain anything that does run off. Managing grass clippings, we deal with this quite a bit in parks. Again, this is the only rain down the drain, so any grass clippings that are on hard surfaces, we try to get out there and blow it off back onto turf areas. And then plowing and piling snow. We got a couple of rain gardens there for infiltration, not snow storage. So these are over at Hayes. So we don't plow into them. We let the snow melt and then filter through there as it's meant to be. I think that's all I got.
Hello everyone, my name is Kent Zimmerman. I'm the utilities supervisor. So I'm going to be going over the utilities items that we have. Catch basins and what they do, different types of sediment removal systems, and wellhead protection areas. As you guys are driving down the street and you start seeing all these sump catch basins that are, catch basins that are next to the road, this is kind of a description of what they look like and how they work. The sediment or the water comes off from the street, goes into these inlet pipes that drop into the structure and then ultimately get piped out of the structure and into ponds and so on and so forth. So as you can see, there's nothing to catch the sediment. So as the sediment comes in, it all ends up going towards those ponds. So that's why we're doing some of those pre-treatments, and we're putting in, I know with natural resources, putting in a lot of the water, I can't remember what they call it, the little ponds along the side to catch a lot of this runoff, so that it does not end up in the ponds. One of the items that we use to try to stop that from happening is the sump catch basin. You probably, during the spring or summer of the year, you'll start seeing a combination machine Vector going to all these different sites, and they'll see them vacuuming out the bottom of these sumps. So as you can see in the picture, you've got two inflow pipes coming into it, or inflow and outflow, and as it comes in, it ends up slowing down that water, and that's ultimately what lets or allows the sediment to drop out into the bottom of the sump. As you can imagine, as time goes on, that sump fills up and it needs to be cleaned out. So we do currently have contractors that come in and have been doing it the last few years, cleaning out those sumps and allowing us to keep that sediment from getting into our pond systems. So that's one of the best ways that we have of doing that. This is one of our sediment removal systems. So downstream from those sumps, we've got the pipes that actually carry the water to the lake. As one of the items that we put in, this is one of our first storm separator or material separators that we put in, and it's the cobblestone storm scepter. So this is on the south end of Cobblestone Lake, and it ends up, the water flow comes into the storm scepter, it spins around and it actually drops out a lot of the sediment. It slows it down. It drops out a significant amount of sand. Usually when we clean this, we've been getting between 1.5 to 2 full factor loads out of there. So it's a very successful system. And this is normally sediment that if we didn't have it there would end up in Cobblestone Lake. So this is one of the more successful things. And then it does have multiple chambers. The different chambers catch some of the floatables. So what we're talking about with that is like the aluminum cans, plastic bottles, that kind of stuff, actually separate into a separate chamber. And then those items are also vacked out by our crew. One of the items that we did do to make it a little bit more safe is we added a second opening in the top so that when we're vacuuming, we still had a way for our crew to get out of that structure. So this is one of the, I guess, better working ones that we have in town. As we did the Johnny Cake Ridge Road, so along Pilot Knob, we've also had some other structures. This particular one is between Long Lake and Farquhar Lake. This structure helps us actually drain Long Lake. It every 5 years, if I remember correctly, we end up draining Long Lake to I think help with some of the different things that are in Long Lake to try to clear it out. And then also, as we talked about, Brian mentioned with the bullheads and so on and so forth that are in there that become a problem. This does have a screen in it, and it does catch and stop some of those fish from going from Long Lake into Farquhar. Well, as I mentioned too, as we did the Johnny Cake Ridge Road reconstruction project a while back, we actually added some more of these these separators along the way, and I believe there's 3 or 4 of them that we've added on that. Again, this is the separators come in right before we end up going into a pond to obviously stop that sediment from entering those ponds. This is the wellhead protection areas. They do have setbacks. So this particular one is well 19. That's right next to Pilot Knob and 140th Street. One of the important things around our wellheads is to make sure that we have setbacks from like stock. If you had like a feeding cow pasture type thing, and if there's infiltration type ponds that are nearby, there's certain setbacks from the wellhead. And then the wellhead itself has to be elevated above the rest of the surrounding areas so that we don't have drainage coming in right next to the wellhead. So these are all things that we keep in mind as we're installing new wells and whatnot as well. Well 5 is probably the one that has the closest stormwater basin next to it, but it is not an infiltration basin. It's just a storage basin that ends up going out and then down the hill. So. And then this is the drinking water supply management area, or DWSMA. This particular area is, you can't really see it so much on the map, but on the little map with the blue lines and stuff, it kind of shows some of the flow comes from the south and ends up going to the northeast. Is kind of how the directional flow for our aquifers, and that direction. We've had some PFAS flumes and different things that we've been dealing with, and some of those things are going to be, well, we're going to be working on that here in the near future to help with that. But we also have with that we have blending that we've been doing and staying under our most recent standards of 4 parts per trillion. The areas, we also just, you can kind of see on this yellow map a bunch of our wellheads and where they're at, and then the areas that are have high amounts of vulnerability and then lower amounts of vulnerability. So the bright, the more tan is the high, and the bright yellow is a little bit lower or moderate to those wellheads. So again, we want to make sure that we're not having anybody influencing them by dumping, materials near the wellheads and so on and so forth. And then as we do we have the new plans that come through and we look at those plans, we make sure that we're not having any kind of influences next to our well sites when they start putting new construction in and so on and so forth.
Good morning, everyone. Brought my notes in case I forget my name. I'm Evan Acosta. I'm the assistant city engineer. Everyone did a great job before me, kind of introducing the MS4 permit and the things we're trying to protect in the city. So water bodies, storm sewer, things like that, streets, natural amenities. I'll be giving an update on our Apple Valley Additions stormwater improvement project, which kind of pairs nicely with today's discussion on maintaining our infrastructure. So the Apple Valley Additions, if you're not familiar with the term there, is the neighborhood south of County Road 42, east of Garden View Drive, west of Pennock, and north of Whitney Drive. So it's one of our biggest neighborhoods in town. It's also one of our oldest neighborhoods in town. So it's deficient in storm sewer, and we've identified a long-term street reconstruction plan to address the failing utilities and streets in that neighborhood. I'm sure all of you who have driven down the streets in this neighborhood are well aware of the condition of the streets, and the utilities are just as bad, if not worse. So you can see here, worth highlighting, that which is in gold is slated for 2026, and that's what we'll get into on the grant-funded work. So you can see, in addition to some streets, we also have Dutchess, Greening, and Pennock Parks highlighted. So I won't go through the whole thing in detail here, but what I want to highlight is we'll be utilizing a combination of infiltration basins, traditional wet ponds, and other infrastructure in the street as part of a $5 million grant that was awarded from the MPCA to complete the work. So the MS4 permit, like we said, it prescribes what the city must do to protect our ponds. And there's an additional section in there that talks about what we have to do to treat stormwater when we reconstruct streets. So this really started back in 2017 with our Keller Lake subwatershed assessment, where we said, we know we'll be coming through here sooner or later to reconstruct the streets. At that time, we know we'll have some amount of ponding that's required. We don't know what that looks like yet. Let's identify what's a good candidate. So we identified Dutchess, Greening, and Pennock Parks, just given that they sit kind of in the middle of this monster neighborhood, as locations where we need to do something. That was kind of built upon from 2021 to 2024, when engineering looked closer at what the streets and utilities need in the neighborhood. If a full reconstruction or if partial reconstruction is required. So as we built upon that, we took a closer look at the size of the ponding that would be required, the costs associated with that, and we kind of came to realize that we were going to spend nearly $3.5 million in stormwater funds on treatment for stormwater that was required. Just for doing the work in the streets, we need to spend $3.5 million on treatment of stormwater. So that was kind of the starting point. We realized that's a big dollar amount. That's a strain on our stormwater funds that could be used to kind of help fund other activities or other initiatives, if you will. So one of the things that we continue to look at was, well, what can we do to get grant funding? What can we do to maybe offset some of the costs? Since Sam quickly said ignoring that section of the MS4 was not a possibility, so we kind of were stuck at that. So we applied for a smaller grant, and we received $60,000, I believe, from the MPCA to say, okay, we know the minimum amount we have to do in the neighborhood to treat stormwater. What if we look a little bit bigger at that, and we just kind of determine what's the most potential stormwater improvements we can make in this entire neighborhood? So that derived a feasibility study that showed us, and I'll show you the graphics from that here shortly, but that showed us, okay, this is the most we could possibly do in the neighborhood. Upsize everything, commandeer some of the park space, commandeer pretty much all of Pennock Park's green space, and what does that look like? What does that cost? So that project itself, right, I mentioned we're going to spend $3.5 million to do the minimum. We came up with an estimate it was going to cost $6 million to do the maximum. So obviously, right, we're not going to spend more than the minimum if there's no grant match, but we applied for a grant, and we were fortunate enough to receive $5 million in funding. So that takes our stormwater amount from $3.5 million down to $1 million, and I'll show you kind of what that looks like now. So Dutchess, Greening, and Pennock Parks here, as they sit in the watershed, this is a pretty big watershed. Keller Lake is still impaired, hopefully. Yeah, well, hopefully for until the projects are delivered. One of the goals of the project is to pull Keller off the impaired waters list. So that feasibility study that I talked about, where we looked at doing the maximum, produced kind of some of the graphics that you're seeing here. So Dutchess Park would receive an infiltration basin kind of in the southwest corner of the park, so the smaller triangle there. And then in order to maintain the play space within the park, or the ball field space, there's an underground infiltration tank that's being proposed in the outfield. So that will handle an enormous amount of stormwater and provide the treatment and detention volumes that the grant provides for. Greening Park is likely to be a traditional wet pond, just given the soil conditions there, but that will sit outside of the ball field far enough away that the kids who are scheduled to play there shouldn't routinely hit home runs into the pond. But that was originally proposed to feature a asphalt trail or bituminous trail around it. We may be pulling away from that depending on what we learn in the future here on where our funds sit on our cost estimates. But originally that was for a bituminous trail around the park. Pennock Park is kind of our biggest investment of resources as part of the grant. Pennock Park features an extremely large infiltration basin, and then you can see there's a small one up at the top of that. Those infiltration basins will kind of serve as the largest water treatment and flood risk reduction component of the project. And I'll get into the flood risk piece of that after this. But in all three parks, we were able to, or as part of the grant, we were able to also use some of the park amenities that were planned for upgrading, so playground equipment, some of the other features. We were able to apply and get funding, or use that $5 million in funding to cover what's being impacted as part of the stormwater park. So sort of an olive branch, if you will, to get Eric to allow us to even look at doing this. So we're happy to report that significant amount of the improvements to playground equipment at Dutchess and at Pennock Park will be funded by the grant. And kind of as I mentioned, the MS4 provides a section that says, thou shall provide water treatment for this amount based on your street reconstruction. It doesn't deal with the park amenities. It doesn't deal with the flood risk reduction component that sometimes we can look at with these other projects. So a piece of our feasibility study showed, we have a modeled flood shape, so it's just modeled. We don't have obviously moving water to have a floodplain, but we have a modeled flood shape that shows there's a significant amount of homes at risk in the neighborhood today. And we're well aware of that, right? The pavement's in such bad condition because there's nowhere for the water to go. It sits at the freeze thaw cycles bust up the pavement. There's no storm sewer in the neighborhood now. Everything drains to Whitney. So by implementing such a large stormwater improvement project, we're actually able to shrink that flood shape by such a significant amount that we're estimating about 60 homes will no longer have a modeled flood risk. Now that's not quite the same as saying they have FEMA flood insurance, but that's still something that's noted. And if you were to go buy a home on Zillow right now, the houses that are in that shape, they have a flood risk layer on Zillow, and those would show that they have a high flood risk. So this data is out there. This data matters to people. It does have an impact on their lives. So that's just a piece of it's a really big piece of the project that we wouldn't otherwise considered if we didn't have the grant funding. So the timeline on this project is, we started a kickoff earlier this summer. We're moving through the design phases right now. We have concepts, and I can get into each of the concepts, but we're planning on bidding the project in March with construction to start in the summer of 26. The grant requires that we're complete with construction by the end of summer of 27, so this is going to be a lot of work that we have to bring in a pretty short amount of time. So at each individual park, this is just a close-up. I mentioned infiltration basin and then an underground tank at Dutchess with new playground equipment. The basketball court's also being relocated. This is Greening Park's close-up shot. And then for Pennock Park, this isn't Pennock, but this is one of the projects we use as inspiration that basically says, right, what can we do inside of a basin that isn't just leave it alone or let plant natives? So the grant's providing a significant amount of funding for us to incorporate landscape or other natural play amenities that you might see at this basin, similar to this basin, which is in Edina. So Pennock Park, we have kind of two renderings that we proposed to the public. We got feedback, we heard comments. Now we're making changes to kind of reflect what people have seen. The top option is just simply, right, plantings, some sort of natural walkthrough, brings people through the basin. When it's flooded, it's not really usable, but infiltration basins drain in 48 hours, so that amount of time that it's not usable isn't really that significant. The bottom was a little bit different of an approach. We do have the flexibility to grade this basin such that if we wanted to, or that's what this second one shows, in a low event storm, so anything below like the 10-year, that's essentially a river bottom, and we can control the flow and basically say you'll have kind of a running water for some amount of time, and then it will dry itself out and draw down. I think we're leaning, or the public was leaning more towards that top option. You can kind of see in the background there was other boardwalks or patios or decks proposed too, kind of moving away from those based on public feedback. And they're likely to be more of a planted, landscaped, something that's just nature to enjoy for the public out in this area. And this was just part of the survey that we included for the public. They could weigh in on the plantings, things they wanted to see. There were several pages of graphics like this that they could provide comments on. So we're excited to bring this forward. It's going to be a pretty enormous ask to get this delivered, and I know, it probably feels like for those of you that maintain the infrastructure, we kind of said, all right, how can we make maintaining this as difficult as possible? But we are looking closely to make sure that things that need to be maintained and regularly accessed are kept kind of close to the street. So, there's obviously going to be times where we need to be inside these basins or underneath accessing that storm chamber. But for the most part, we're doing everything we can to make sure all the pre-treatment, and Kent mentioned those substructures, is out front and out in the right of way for us to access. That's pretty much everything I have, but happy to take questions or hand it back to Sam back there.
All right, everyone, that actually concludes our event today, so thank you for coming. The MS4 program really does require all of us to work together, so we do appreciate the work that you guys do. So just know that, I guess, and happy to answer any questions if you guys have any. So thank you.